Hey, so there's a shadow cyber war shadowing this Israeli-Iranian conflict. We're going to talk about it. You're watching TechStrong Gang. Hey everyone, happy Thursday and welcome to TechStrong Gang. We've got a great show lined up for you. We've got some important things we want to talk about today, and we've got some important people to talk about it with. Let me introduce you to our gang lineup for today. First of all, I'm happy to introduce someone making his debut on our TechStrong Gang, but he's no stranger if you've been in the world of cyber and DevOps and DevSecOps. I've known the man for a long time and thrilled to have him on here. Let me introduce you to John Morello. Hey, John, how are you?
Hey, Alan, good to see you again, and thanks for having me.
My pleasure. John, since it's your first time on, give people a little, beyond what I said, give them a little bit of who John Morello is.
Sure. So, like you said, I've been doing this cyber stuff for, I guess, 25 years at this point, going back to many years at Microsoft in the early 2000s. Then probably we're best known for the company we had in 2015, Twistlock, that kind of started the whole container security world. And we sold Twistlock to Palo in 2019. And we have a company now, Minimus, that basically helps organizations reduce the risks in their containerized environments by giving them purposeful built images that reduce the number of vulnerabilities by 95 to 98%. So really dramatic changes in like their risk posture. So you can see more of that and try them out at Minimus.io, but appreciate you having us on, Al.
Absolutely. I interviewed Minimus. Great product there. John, you're usually CTO. Are you CTO at Minimus? Is that?
I am, yeah. We all have our little roles that we play.
No, that's your lane, baby.
Team is the VP of R&D, same as usual. Yep.
Good for you. All right, moving on from John, we have another resident cyber expert we're thrilled to have on. She writes at Security Boulevard as well as just really well known in the cyber media world. Our friend Terri Robinson. Hey, Terri, how are you?
Good. How are you doing this morning?
I'm happy to be here and glad to have you on. Thank you.
Glad to be here.
So moving from the East Coast to the West Coast, our Silicon Valley man on the scene, John Swartz. Hey, John, how are you?
I'm good. How's it going? Great to be here. I'm looking forward to the show.
I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And now we'll go, well, there's no joy in Harrisonville today. The mighty Yankees have struck out again. Is it about 30 innings without a run now, Mike?
Yeah, I think it's some sort of contagious disease that's got the whole offense suffering.
4-0. Coming off a 1-0, a 2-0. It's kind of disgusting. Let me just say that down here in Florida land, we're real happy to be celebrating our hometown Panthers winning a Stanley Cup, the second in a row. Let me just, for the record, I'm a New York Rangers fan. But look, I live down here. You got to give the boys credit. 2 Stanley Cups in a row is not bad, so go Panthers.
It's the friggin' middle of June and we're playing hockey. How silly is that?
It's South Florida and we're playing hockey. It's silly to begin with, but what do you want? Anyway, let's get into our show real quick here, right? So, Mike, as I said, I teased in the opening, there's a shadow cyber war kind of ghosting or following the hot war between Israel and Iran. What do we got?
Yeah, Terri has a story about the hacktivist part of this equation, but there's also cyber espionage and all kinds of attacks on critical infrastructure. And Terri, I guess, has this just kind of emerged as a new front that needs to be battled in the same way we have war at sea and war in the air and war in the ground? There's war in cyber.
So no sooner had Israel launched its strikes against the, Iran nuclear infrastructure than the cyber theater opened up, right? And I think that to no one's surprise that happens. I think that, of course, we need to start treating that like its own theater and have the defenses shored up before the stuff even gets started. Radware was the one that first observed sort of an uptick in activity in the Telegram channels. And they're from the actors that are sympathetic to Iran. Um, and but this battle in cyber with these two countries is not new. You go all the way back to Stuxnet. What was that? 2010, when the Stuxnet worm was deployed to hobble the centrifuges critical to Iran's nuclear program, and then DDoS attacks just a decade ago on U.S. financial institutions. So, in early indications, there were claims by the Arabian Ghost that Israeli radio stations had been shut down. I think the one that it sort of concerned me and made me wonder why their defenses weren't shored up is that the Mossad website was shuttered. So I'm not sure why these things haven't been more protected. In addition to sort of this disruption and some of the damage that they can do, there's a huge disinformation campaign already underway. And as we know, the disinformation campaigns are extremely dangerous these days. So,
John Morello, is the cybersecurity community watching this closely? Because there's things to be learned here. There's new tactics and techniques, and this will become something of an example that we cite for many years to come.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, anytime you have a major geopolitical event like this and there's cyber response and cyber acts that are occurring as part of it, there's always an opportunity to learn, just as there is on the, kinetic battlefield. I mean, I think one of the things that's been most amazing in these conflicts in both Iran and in Ukraine in the past just few weeks has been the use of drones as a way to really asymmetrically do things that historically would have required substantially more risk, substantially more military hardware and planning and so forth. But I mean, the notion that, like, for example, with Ukraine being able to disable a third, depending on the numbers that you believe, disable or destroy a third of Russia's strategic aircraft, and with Israel potentially destroying substantial amounts of ballistic missiles on the ground using drones, and the fact that those drones were not launched from the territory of the attacker, but rather were launched from within the territory of the attacked, I think is a really amazing thing, and frankly, something that concerns me a lot as an American. I mean, if you think about just having like the free society that we do in the U.S., where it's relatively easy to travel around, it's relatively easy to, to import materials, it's relatively easy to buy properties. You can even easily imagine adversaries, purchasing properties, close to American military bases and spending years developing facilities and capabilities for drones and be able to do things in the U.S. homeland that historically, the oceans had basically shielded us from. So I think there's a lot to learn from the cyber standpoint. I think one of the things that's been interesting to me with it is there has been less obvious actions on the cyber side, which I don't think implies that there have been less actions, maybe just less things that have been visible. I think what we don't know is maybe all those things that have occurred, that have not yet made it into reporting, like what Terry's done, or not yet made it into the historical records that we'll find out years hence from now, which probably were involved in Israel having such, exquisite intelligence about the locations of Iranian leadership. There's a good chance cyber had a role in that. And there's really no telling what else cyber is doing to be able to inform Israeli war planning around the location of ballistic missiles, the status of the Iranian nuclear program, and other activities that directly result in actual, like, kinetic decisions about how they go to battle. So I think Terry's reporting is really interesting, but I think there's probably a lot more that we'll all learn in the coming years that's going to reveal more about how cyber was so
yeah, I
instrumental
think
in
that
all of this.
blend of cyber and kinetic is going to be something to, to watch going forward. I honestly believe that they're codependent at this point, and they're working in tandem. Yeah, so I think it will be interesting to see what kinds of actions emerge later on. Hopefully, we find out about them sooner rather than later. But
I tend to think it'll take a while. But let's be clear. John, you mentioned the Ukrainian conflict. The fact of the matter is we've seen the cyber theater play a role. I guess the first time I saw it that I remember was when Russia was going after the Republic of Georgia, right? They kind of instigated a coup and took out the president, Shachiavelli or whatever his name was. They shut down Georgia's internet, basically. They also did it, I think, in Chechnya when they had an uprising there. So Russia's been a leader in this a while. But I think in every conflict, we're seeing cyber plays a role. And there's offensive and defensive aspects of it. John, you mentioned intelligence gathering. I'm sure they had Find My iPhones on some of these Iranian leaders, It's crazy when you think about it, and then when you look, though, at the two combatants here, you look at Iran, you look at Israel. Yes, there are Iranian hacktivists that are funded by Iran. And, they're not slouches. They're not slouches. I don't think if they didn't take down the Mossad site unless the Mossad site wanted to be taken down, because Israel had the advantage of surprise here. They knew what they were doing, so they probably had a chance to shore up before the attack. On the other side, you're talking about Israel, the people behind Unit 8200 or whatever, 8600. Talking about the people who have invented a lot of offensive cybersecurity. Though let's not think that the NSA are choir boys. They're not, right? Probably the U.S. is as guilty as anyone or as thick admitted this as anyone else.
I hope so, as an American citizen.
Yeah,
I hope that's the case.
I mean, everything I've always learned, and, having also been John in cyber 25, 30 years and sold to a lot of the agencies over the years before I got into this, the NSA is still probably the premier outfit in the world, right? And but the Israelis are no slouch. Hence the whole Israeli cybersecurity industry. So you've got to assume that they've been doing offensive and defensive type of operations that are, thick and full there. But let me put my bow around all of this. Modern warfare is cyber warfare. Women's rights are human rights. Modern warfare is cyber warfare too. And any combatant who doesn't put that into their mix is seeding out some really big territory.
I suspect this has already gone global too, right? Because you got to figure that Russia and North Korea are helping Iran, and the NSA here is probably helping out Israel. And so, I don't mean the physical conflict.
I don't know, Mike. I don't know, because you know what? If you're Russia, and you could see it by Russia's public actions as well, you may not want to get that involved in this. We're certainly not leaving any fingerprints.
No, but
I'll also bring up another point that I think is really probably very directly relevant to the IT backgrounds that I think all of us had, and probably a lot of the audience has with it too. Is we talk a lot about supply chain security and software supply chain security. You can see kind of the physical manifestation of that in at least a cyber adjacent way with what Israel did with Hezbollah and the pagers and the VHF radios, which was honestly like an incredible operation. I mean, just
the stuff
something
of
from
movies. I mean,
truly. Yeah. But it also really makes, as somebody who's very much into the industry, our whole business is about providing customers with secure software images that include all this open source stuff. One of the things that I think about often with this, and that there's not really easy answers to, is there are so many individual open source packages, libraries, projects, whatever you want to refer to them as, that are fundamental to everybody's usage of the modern internet infrastructure as we know it. And many of those projects are not things that are common sort of household or industry names. If I said Nginx, everybody knows that, everybody's used that and so forth, but they're it's probably, a few dozen individual tiny little components that go into making an Nginx build work that are much lesser known projects that might be maintained by, one or just a small number of people that don't really have very much name recognition at all. And, you saw, I believe it was maybe a year or so ago with an example of, what I believe was likely some nation state actor trying to compromise a compression library that was widely used in a very I think very skillful way that was not like an obvious kind of compromise, that they were trying to poison that supply chain very far upstream so that it could emanate down into lots of other applications that use that. One of the things that really concerns me is our ability as frankly, as a society, I would say, that we're both reliant completely in our just normal operation of all these systems that everybody uses, that are frankly maintained as almost like hobbyist things in the open source. And it's very difficult to know in many cases, are the people that contribute updates to those things, are they doing so in a good faith manner to improve them? Or, are they potentially working for some kind of nation state or just motivated, kind of hacktivist sort of actor there to do something to poison it? And, so far we haven't seen tremendous amounts of examples of that occurring other than like the one that I mentioned and probably a few others. But I also always wonder if you really got into a situation where a major player in this, a Russia, China, United States, for example, felt really existentially threatened, what other cyber weapons would come out that we don't know about yet, that are out there that would be very difficult for organizations to defend against because they already were running that stuff inside their environments. And like I said, there's no easy answers to that, but it's something that, being in this space, being very intimate in this space is something that really I think about a lot and concerns me a lot, because there's not easy answers for how do we reap the benefits of this kind of open source ecosystem while still being able to protect against that kind of threat.
With this asymmetrical warfare, there's like a sidebar going on that's kind of interesting to me that applies to Silicon Valley and the Beltway. And there's this emergence of AI and these AI contracts that are being awarded by the federal government for cyber defense purposes. So Monday, OpenAI has something called the OpenAI for Government Initiative, and they got their first big contract from the Pentagon on Monday. It was 1 year, $200 million. So their AI tools are going to be used for proactive cyber defense. They also have a partnership with Anduril to improve our defense systems. And it's interesting too that we have yet another partnership between Anthropic, AWS, and Palantir to provide Claude models to intelligence defense agencies. So you're starting to see these companies, and for OpenAI, they really want to concentrate as much on government contracts as the consumer side. And so we're starting to see that development of that angle as well. And it's going to be lucrative, and it's gaining a lot of attention and a lot of interest from AI companies.
It's going to get scary because the bad guys are using LLMs to take a vulnerability and create an exploit in a matter of minutes, and the attacks are going to be essentially in real time. And we're not really set up to do that kind of defense. So, maybe Amazon is, but most companies are still running around, trying to manually update firewall rules, and it's just going to be cozy.
Let me bring it back to the Iranian-Israeli conflict. There's a difference between sympathetic hacktivist and the state itself. And the hacktivists are nice, but it kind of sounds like Matthew Broderick to me. Let's play thermonuclear war versus trained professional cyber warfare, cyber soldiers. And I think the results you're seeing in the field probably point to the difference between them. Defacing the website. I mean, we're hearing reports that the internet in Iran is very much on and off. Now, is that the Iranian government shutting it down so that people shutting down dissent, perhaps? Or shutting down, information that could lead to Israel and used for targeting and so forth? Or is it the Israelis shutting down the internet to affect Iranian communications? Little of both,
Perhaps,
maybe.
I mean, I guess that points to another problem. It's kind of like the democratization of cyber warfare, for lack of a better term, has certainly made that a more complicated picture, hasn't it? Like, who's doing what to whom? Is the government?
Yeah, you don't know who the good guys, the bad guys, and what the good guys consider good and what the bad guys consider bad. It's all cyber to me. Anyway, hey, let's take a break. We've kind of gone overtime on this one. We're going to come back and let's talk about MCPs and DevOps. You're watching Tech Strong Gang.